Yep.
We got lucky.
Drop down that microphone over there on the.
Okay.
Drop that down because I can hear you coming through the headset.
Wow. KPFFLP, Pahrump, Nevada.
That's probably why it whistles.
Statements and opinions made on the following program are not necessarily those of this station or its affiliates. Fighting corruption with Anthony Greco. Fighting government corruption, the real gangsters.
Greetings from the corrupt criminal enterprise we know as Nye County. I am Anthony Greco, and this is my show, Fighting Government Corruption, the Real Gangsters. So before we get into the show, I'd just like to say a couple of words about Tony DeMeo. I was a little shocked at what happened. He passed away, and I still don't know any of the details, but I just want to say a few things about Tony. I know him for well over a decade. He was actually in 2010. I met him from going to the Friday morning breakfast that Bernie Cusimano still does every Friday morning. And I met a lot of the politicians there. I met Tony there. And when I was running for office in 2010, we were having a Friday morning breakfast at the Pahrump Nugget. We used to be in one of the back rooms there. And they had a book sale going on, so after the breakfast, everybody went in and checked it out. And I was walking around, and Tony said to me, he says, what's going on? I says, well, I'm just trying to stay out of trouble. And he looked at me and he says, well, why are you trying to get involved in politics if you're trying to stay out of trouble? And I laughed and didn't realize what he meant for a long time. And he was actually trying to let me know that if you get involved in politics and you're not on the same page with everybody else, they're going to try to run over you and discredit you, which they did a pretty good job, because I wasn't on the same page with now that I call a corrupt criminal enterprise, because at the time I wasn't paying attention. In 2010, I really wasn't paying attention to what Nye County was doing. I was more interested in what was going on with the town board, because we had one at the time. And there was a few reasons why I liked Tony. One, he was an East Coaster, Brooklyn, and he was a cop in New Jersey. And he never lied to me. And he would always try to fill you in. And as far as a sheriff is an elected position and is more of administrator than law enforcement. And as an administrator, Tony was very good at that. And no matter what people try to say about him, about his budget and everything, Tony knew what was going on with his budget. He could tell you about what he spent on maintenance on the vehicles, how much he spent on fuel, and he didn't have to look at a piece of paper. You asked him a question, he could answer you. And Rick Marshall was the same way when he was with Tony, because they worked a lot of stuff together. Mainly the deputies were controlled by the captain, which was Bill Beck at the time. So, as far as the overtime on his budget and everything, that was ruined by Bill Beck. So, but Tony always gave you a straight answer, at least to me. And I don't see why he wouldn't do it to anybody else, because I'm not anybody special. So he just told me what he knew. And Tony, when the situation happened at the house on Pahrump Valley Boulevard, where all the problems happened with the arson nonsense and everything, and at the time Tony was running, and I had a Tony DeMeo sign screwed to the side of the house because we were renovating, and it didn't make a difference, a couple of screw holes, because we were doing siding on the house after. And actually the fire marshal, Michael Kolpak, he said to Tony, well, you got to investigate this. And Tony said, no, you're the fire investigator, you investigate it. And he tried, and and Kolpak tried to make Tony look bad. He said, well, you're not investigating because the guy is helping you with your campaign, and that wasn't the way it was. Okay, all it was a sign. But Tony was always respectful to me. When he was running the last time, he would say hello to me, but when we were in general public, because of my reputation, he had to keep an arm's distance, and I understood that. It wasn't a problem. I didn't take it personally. He had to not show. Don't forget, we had people here saying, even in the paper, that I was a convicted murderer and arsonist. So, you know, even somebody on Tony's campaign, which I had talked about once before, were telling people during the campaign, when they had a booth at the park, that I was a murderer. And I didn't say anything because I didn't want people to know that Tony's campaign person was doing that. So I just said what happened. I wouldn't say who it was, they were campaigning for, because I didn't want to hurt his chances in the election, because I really wanted to see him as sheriff again. I don't think that we would be getting abused like we are with the traffic tickets and everything, because Tony had a rule. He knew that a majority of this area was in poverty. So when they got pulled over for doing something, as long as it wasn't totally out of control, he made sure they had a license and insurance, and they would just get a warning. Well, Tony's warnings turned into Sharon Worley's over $1 million added to the county coffers in tickets. So Tony was a constitutional sheriff, and we haven't had one since him, and I don't think we had one before him. So he was the only constitutional sheriff we ever had. And it's unfortunately that he cannot be a sheriff again here. So I just wanted to say that. So now let's get into, I just want to let everybody know on Godfather Vegas on the Facebook page, pinned to the top of the page, it's always going to be there, is the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the amendments in full text and audio, just like an audio book. Okay, it's always up there. You could go there. It's about 1 hour and 7 minutes long, and you will get the Constitution read to you, the Bill of Rights, and the amendments. I left it there pinned to the top, so if somebody wants to go in there and put their kids in front of the computer so they could understand what our Constitution, Bill of Rights, and the amendments are, it would be a very good thing. I actually got that off of Donald Trump's website. He actually has a Facebook page. And I pulled it off of there, I shared it onto my Facebook page, and I pinned it to the top, so no matter what gets put up there, it will always be there. So I think if you have children or grandchildren, buy them some ice cream and put them in front of the computer and let them listen to that for 1 hour and 7 minutes. It'll probably be the best education that they're going to get. Especially, we should know our constitutional rights and the Bill of Rights and the amendments, because you're Americans. You should know it. You know, people who swear allegiance to the Constitution to get a government job, they're just mouthing words just to turn around and get a job. Because I guarantee you, if it wasn't part of a government job, they wouldn't swear to that oath. But they do it, and they probably never even read it. And every once in a while I go there and I read it and listen to it, and everybody should do it. It should be embedded into your brain. Okay? It's very important. Now, on Facebook, it's called Vegas Lawyers. And guess who pops up on that? Tony Abentangelo. Tony Abentangelo is a wife beater. And I have the documentation if anybody wants to see it. Anthony Tony Abentangelo was a justice of the peace in Clark County. and he had to resign. The deal he made for beating his wife without getting anything, going to prison or anything, was that he resigned from Justice of the Peace and would not run for Justice of the Peace for 4 years, so he would miss another term. And then how I met Tony Abentangelo was, this guy I know had him for an attorney, and he was coming back and forth to Pahrump. And when he lost his job, he had to resign because he was defrocked for beating his wife. Glenn Lerner gave him a shot, and Glenn Lerner got into criminal law and put Tony Abentangelo in there, because part of the deal was if he stepped down as judge, he would retain his law license. Other than like Bill Clinton for lying on the oath, he lost his law license and can't get it back. This guy cut a deal, and the funny thing about it is, on Facebook, it's got a picture of him, and it says, "A good lawyer knows the law, a great lawyer knows the judge." Okay, so why don't you just advertise you're a sleazebag? I mean, so I put all over that Facebook page that he was a wife beater and he's a defrocked Justice of the Peace. So if he wants to sue me, I'd love it, because I have a suit against him. And how I got to know him was through a friend of mine. And then my co-defendant was looking for an attorney. And because he was working with Glenn Lerner, I figured it was a big firm because he had Glenn Lerner's card with his name on it. So when my co-defendant, we waited for him at court, and my co-defendant wanted to retain him. And listen to what kind of sleazebag he is. The guy's working with Glenn Lerner. His cards have Glenn Lerner on it. And he tells my co-defendant, make that initial check for $1,500 out to Tony Abentangelo. So not only is a sleazebag Justice of the Peace that beat his wife, he actually screwed Glenn Lerner, who gave him a shot when he was no law firm, no nothing. He put him on his feet, gave him an office and everything, and what does Tony Abentangelo do? He slaps the guy in the face and backstabs him, and turns around and has checks while people are going after him for Glenn Lerner. He's having the checks made out to him personally. So, is not only a wife beater, but he's a sleazy person and a scoundrel, and screws people he does business with. So, if you need an attorney, definitely do not go to him, because remember, he made a plea deal, which he loves making plea deals for people, so because he did one for himself. He made a plea deal to step down as judge, to keep his law license, and not run for judge again. This is not a good person. Any person, any man or woman who beats their spouse is a sleazebag. My grandfather told me when I was a very young kid, even before I got married, said, if the woman you're with, if you have to raise your hand to her, you're with the wrong person, because nobody should get that mad at anybody that they have to raise their hand to somebody. So, this is the kind of people that are lawyers and judges, that they beat their wives, and because they know the judge, they get away with it. So I thought that was pretty interesting in his ad, that a good lawyer knows the law, a great lawyer knows the judge. Yes, and he sold out my co-defendant, and that case dragged on for over 5 years, and finally he just ran her out of money and scared her to death, and she took a plea deal, which was, it wasn't that bad, but a person should not plead guilty to something they don't do. It doesn't make a difference. You know, it's like Judge Lane says to Diane Davis, or they said, the prosecutor says, well, she has no remorse. Well, why would you have remorse if you didn't do anything wrong? You know, they said the same thing about, well, he's not showing any remorse, he's not admitting any guilt. Why would I admit guilt to something I didn't do? Why would I have remorse for something I didn't do? See, that's what I don't get. They tried to make you look bad that you did a crime that you didn't do, and you're not showing remorse. Judge Lane, okay, is a lying, deceitful scoundrel. And I don't say that to be disrespectful to his church, but that's what he is. He is a lying, deceitful scoundrel, just like Sharon Worley, and I'll get into her for a minute, because Judge Lane is a liar, and I can prove it. Judge Lane constantly says that I stole $30,000 from Allstate when nobody that I know got a penny from Allstate. Not me, not my co-defendant, nobody. First of all, how could Allstate give me any money when I wasn't the homeowner or the policyholder? So when he keeps saying, and he said it minimum 4 times in court, 4 different times, that I stole $30,000 from Allstate, and I'm still waiting to see a check from Allstate under my name so he can show it to me. I want to see it. That's why he's a liar. Because what he does is he uses his position of being a judge, and most people will respect the position. Unfortunately, by respecting the position, you're respecting a lying, deceitful scoundrel like Judge Robert Lane. He's a liar. He lies all the time. And that's just one thing that I know of that he lied about, because I was involved personally. He said the same thing about Diane Davis, that she was convicted of arson. She was not convicted of arson. Oh no, I'm sorry. She was convicted of, she was not convicted of killing the animals there, because let me tell you something, if there was a good investigation, she wouldn't have even been convicted of arson, because she didn't do it. And I'm not gonna blow her chances of an appeal, but we know what happened, okay? Because we had an outside investigator, people paid an outside investigator to come in and investigate it, but Lane, being all power, didn't allow certain things. Just like I had 29 witnesses for my case, he allowed me 3. How does a judge allow anything? He's supposed to make sure that my lawyer does his job correctly for me, and the prosecutors do their job correctly without lying and making things up. I think when you're making things up about somebody that's not true, it's a lie. Okay, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. All right? But if you look at my case, I went down to get my whole transcript. All the closing arguments are missing. Of course they're missing, because the prosecutor, Michael Kovac, now we got Michael Kovac, who was the fire marshal, and Michael Kovac was the prosecutor for the Attorney General's office. He lied throughout his entire closing arguments. It was all lie. Okay, so they're missing. The testimony of my 3, not my 29, but my 3 witnesses is missing from the transcript. Why is it missing? Because it contradicts what they did. They were all lying. At the end of the case, the prosecutor from the AG's office goes to shake my hand. He says, "You don't want to shake my hand?" "Why would I shake your hand? You lied." This is before we even had a verdict. He lied. It was a bunch of lies, because they wanted to discredit me, and they really thought that they were going to have enough of power to get me 20 to life. Now here's a funny thing. It's not really funny. Diane Davis arson was 10 to 20. My arson was 20 to life. Now how do you do that? Well, that's up to the prosecution, and I guess the judge got involved in it, because the judge is the second line of prosecution, especially in Lane's court. I don't know how it is in Wonka's court, because I really don't watch her that much. But Lane is working with the prosecution always, because he was a prosecutor. And right now, Nye County's best prosecutor is Judge Robert Lane. You ever hear of wolf in sheep's clothing? Well, he's a prosecutor in judge clothing, because he is the prosecutor, because he helps the prosecution. He's unethical, and he's a lying, deceitful scoundrel. And here's another thing with Robert Lane. I don't know if anybody remembers the situation where somebody got killed by hitting somebody's cow up in the northern part of Nye County. And Harry Keene was the attorney. Harry Keene was my first attorney I fired. And Lane and Harry Keene were good friends. And Harry Keene wasn't doing his job for these people that owned the ranch where the cow got run over and the person ended up getting killed. And Harry Keene was getting paid. It wasn't a public defender. And these people lost. Harry Keene was not doing his job. Half the time he didn't show up. He wasn't prepared. And Judge Lane should have told these people in confidence, your lawyer's not here. This is not the first time. He's not prepared. You should think about getting another attorney. But Harry Keene was his friend, so they protect their friends that belong to the corrupt criminal enterprise. Well, after Harry Keene got fired, I fired him, and then I brought the stuff about Colony Insurance versus Harry Keene, because Colony Insurance got sued for the people's that Harry Keene didn't represent properly, and they had to pay out all kinds of money. And Harry Keene got dropped, Colony Insurance versus Harry Keene. And at the time, Harry Keene was partners with Gibson. It was Gibson and Keene, and Jason Ernest was an associate partner. And Jason Ernest is not a bad guy. And, especially when he's getting paid, he does a pretty good job. He did a good job for Heidi Fleiss. Actually, the case was dropped by Wonka because they violated her Fourth Amendment. They had an illegal search and seizure. Jason Ernest, because he was getting paid, he brought that up. Case was thrown out. So, there is justice sometime. Unfortunately, you pay heavy for it. So, I'm telling you about Judge Lane being a lying, deceitful scoundrel. And Harry Keene, which now Harry Keene, after I fired him and the county pulled the contract, actually what the county did was they took the contract away from Gibson, Keene, and Ernest, and they gave them 3 individual contracts. So Jason Ernest is still there. I don't know if Tom Gibson didn't want to renew his contract or not after a while, but Harry Keene, how they broke the contract up, because they didn't want the other 2 lawyers to lose the contract, so they broke it up individually. And then because Harry Keene had problems even with the Supreme Court, he wouldn't show up to the Supreme Court, and he was not insurable. And that's how I went to the commissioners and said, you got to dump Harry Keene. He cannot have this contract because he's not insurable, and if he makes a mistake, it's going to go on the backs of the county. So you need to remove him from county payroll or contract, because you don't want the county to suck wind. They could pay millions, So that's how Harry Keene lost that. And then now Harry Keene has lost his law license. Okay, so when I talk about Harry Keene, I know what I'm talking about. And I've been talking about this before he lost his law license, because I didn't know how he had one that long. So, and that's one of Lane's friends. So I don't know where he is, what rock he crawled into or under, but I hope he stays there. Nye County is a much better place now that Harry Keene isn't here. So we talked about Lane being a lying, deceitful scoundrel, and